Thank you very much for the introduction. As Antoinette said, my name is Jonathan Shields. I am the head of economics and business at Highgrove Online School, which is an international centre servicing students across the Caribbean, Asia, and Africa, and also North America as well as Europe. So it's truly international in nature. And I teach international A-level business. Okay, so this is my day job, teaching this stuff. The training you'll receive today is not from somebody who is retired, who has no knowledge of international A-level business. I do this on a day-to-day basis. In fact, I just did a lesson yesterday on international A-level business on place, the fourth P in the marketing mix, although it really should be a D because it stands for distribution. So hopefully you'll agree that we're in safe hands here. Away from my day job, I'm also the principal examiner for one of the UK domestic A-level business units and chief examiner for the domestic UK GCSE in business. So hopefully there's a significant amount of examination experience and teaching experience behind today's training. Now, the critical thing here is because we're looking at A-level questions, we're going to have some very long answers. So you do need to download the delegate booklet in the resources pod. You do need that, okay? And it may well be that you want to print it out, perhaps, or you might want to annotate it in some way, shape, or form. And it may well be that you want to do that at a later date. For example, you could look back at the training video and then go back and add the annotation later, okay? But you do want to have that delegate booklet because you're constrained by the size of a PowerPoint slide. And as soon as you start to look at longer answers, there is absolutely no way you can get longer answers onto a PowerPoint slide so that they are legible. Okay, that's a bit about me. I'm now going to ask for a bit about you. You might want to tell me who you are and where you teach and the school that you're in. Okay, and while that is going on, that will be a perfect time to organize your delegate booklet download using what Antoinette has put in to the webinar chat. Okay, so we've got Diana from a lower college in Marbella. Ooh, very nice. I can imagine it's a lot warmer than it is in the UK right now. I think it's about 10 degrees and raining in Cornwall. Shiromi from Dubai, I bet that's a similar wonderful level of weather. I see Valencia again. I see Madrid. I see Cyprus. I see Switzerland. That's great. Sri Lanka. Oh, the wonderful Sri Lanka. Online learning is Alison. Ooh, snap, that's exactly what I'm doing. Jerry McCann, I think I said this in the IGCSE training. I'm sure I know your name from somewhere. I've got a feeling that I might have trained you in a very large white building in an industrial estate in Madrid, but who knows? That's uncharted territory. Maybe my memory is not as good as it once used to be. Armenia, okay, so we're sort of getting out there towards Asia as well. Doha and Qatar, Nigeria, fantastic. Montenegro, Jordan, India, okay, wow. Bangladesh, might have met you before Humaira, Pakistan, Karachi, and then we've got something a little bit less sort of like exotic, Bedford in the UK. So this is all good stuff. And hopefully while people have been putting these introductions in, they have been downloading the delegate booklet, okay, using the instructions that are in the webinar chat, okay? I can guarantee somebody will ask, how do I download the delegate booklet again during today's session? Guarantee it, but let's hope not. Okay, so what are we going to look at today? We are going to basically focus on the examiner's report, okay? Now, it's only an hour's training. So if you're expecting this training to be a comprehensive training session that considers every single question across all 4 papers that make up the International A-level in business, you are mistaken. It's not going to be that. What I'm going to look at are the questions that students found most problematic. How did I find that? By going to Results Plus and doing a search of questions where there was a high percentage of students who scored very low marks and where the average mark was incredibly low. And you can do that when you go on to Results Plus and you have a look at global analysis. That's actually a really, really useful tool. You can then compare your students' performance to the global average. Again, a useful tool. And it's a useful tool to ask the question, why? Why have my students not done so well compared to the global average? Or maybe it's the converse, which would be fantastic if it was. We're going to have very much a focus on papers 1 and 2. And what we're going to learn from 1 and 2 transponds across to papers 3 and 4. We just simply do not have the time in today's training session to have a look at every single badly performing question across 4 different papers. We simply don't, especially when we consider the length of some of the papers or some of the questions. So let's get on with it. This is what we're going to be looking at today. Okay, we're going to be going back and having a look at that May-June 2024 examination series, looking at the poorly performing questions and having a look at why they were poorly performing. And these are highlighted in the examiner's report. Now, at any time, you can throw me a question, okay? And there's 2 ways you can throw me a question. You can put it into the webinar chat, in which case everybody else can see your question, and that is fine, because if you're asking the question, probably somebody else is thinking about asking the question as well. Or if you want to contact me privately, that's where you use the question and answer pod, okay? That is a way of communicating with me, which means that nobody else can see what you've written. So the choice is yours, and I will stop at various intervals when I see lots of questions being populated. And please do ask those questions, because the purpose of this is to learn and to take back into your center and into your classroom an insight into what is going on in the examination marking process. Okay, let's get started. So let's have a look at the overview of the papers, first of all. Where have I taken all of this stuff from? I've taken it from the introductory page in each of the 4 papers examiner's reports. So very limited issues regarding the amount of time that people had. The 20-mark questions were, generally speaking, answered well. I was surprised by that. Surprised by that, especially when the 10 and 12-mark assessed questions were actually not done so well. Remember, the 10-mark assessed questions come in papers 1 and 2, WS 1.1 and WBS 1.2, and the 12-mark assessed questions come in WBS 1.3 and WBS 1.4. No difference in the level descriptors. It's just that at levels 3 and levels 4, the grade descriptors and the grade range is slightly larger. Okay. Grade boundaries, especially with papers 3 and 4, the IA2 remained roughly the same, but there was a fairly significant change in papers 1 and 2, and I suspect that was to counteract for a perceived easier paper in the previous examination series and a perceived harder paper in the previous examination series. More on that in a moment. The big issue, and it's one of my bugbears, to be honest, poor performance in points-based marked questions. These are, in my view, the place to score the marks. When I'm teaching my students, I do not want to see any marks lost. If I was looking at paper 1, in section A, question 1A through to question 1C inclusive, and in section B, question 2A to 2C inclusive, I am expecting my students to get full marks on the define question, the construct, explain, calculate question, and the analyze question. I'm not expecting them to lose any marks there, because if they do, I take it personally and I feel that I've not given them sufficient practice, because these are the low-hanging fruit. These are the easy marks to pick up. When we get into the levels-based questions, the 8s, the 10s, the 20s, or the 12s instead of the 10, if we're looking at papers 3 and 4, that's more of a judgment-based scenario. And it's very difficult to convince an examiner that you're going to get full marks. You're going to get into a certain level, but you might not get full marks. Whereas with the 6, 4, and 2 mark questions, if you know what you're doing, you can get full marks. Okay, so what have we got here? Alison has asked a question. Are grade boundaries going to stay relatively the same now? The idea would be yes, but it's dependent on statistical calculations. I mean, the chief examiner and the principal examiner have a very limited impact in deciding the grade boundaries. Standards, with their statistical analysis, pretty much develop the grade boundaries. So the grade boundaries are really according to how the paper has performed. And you've got that normal distribution, that bell-shaped distribution. And you can only give a certain percentage of people A stars, a certain percentage of people A's, etc., etc., etc. And that probably accounts for our next slide, which is why we've got such a significant change in the grade boundaries for Unit 1, Marketing and People, and Unit 2, Managing Business Activities. Less so in Units 3 and Units 4. So I am drawn to the fact that in 2023, the A grade was 60. That's a big score. Whereas in 2024, it was 54. Remember, 60 translates to 80 UMS and 50 translates to 80 UMS. Okay, these are the raw marks we have here. Whereas it went in the opposite direction with Unit 2. Obviously, in Unit 2, in 2023, it was a tough paper. Not so tough in 2024. So what's become more testing in Unit 2 has been offset to a degree by something becoming less testing in 2024 in terms of the grade boundaries. But with Units 3 and Units 4, WBS 1.3 and WBS 1.4, I'm not seeing a significant change, certainly at the top end. It's 1 mark, yeah? And in many cases at the top end, it's actually more favorable to the candidate. But that, again, could reflect the fact that papers could be more difficult, more easy, compared to different years. So it's always a statistically driven process. That's the critical thing to understand. Don't think that somebody is sat there thinking, oh, let's make the grade boundary this, because that's what I think it should be. It's statistically driven, okay? And it has to be. Not everybody can get a starred A grade. There simply aren't enough university places to accommodate everybody getting a starred A grade. And it's like mercantilism. It could potentially debase the currency. Okay, let's have a look at the statistical range now. There we are. Around about 9% of students are getting an A star in 2024. And only 7.7% of students are failing. Okay, so they're cumulative statistics, by the way, on that far right-hand side. Entry was up by around about 400 students. So 2639 students across the globe now sit international A-level business. Just looking at the webinar chat, no more questions coming in. So we will advance into questions that perform badly in June 2024. Now, again, this is, for me, statistically driven. I'm looking at Results Plus and looking at the questions where the average mark was low and a significant percentage scored 0 on the points-based questions, or level 1/level 2 on the levels-based questions. Okay, let's start off, first of all, with paper 1, and we're looking at question 1B, and it's a calculate question. Now, I see these calculate questions as just something that you train students through, okay? I spend probably 2 or 3 weeks on calculate questions, just giving them every single calculate question that has ever been asked. Now, I suspect the reason why this question was not well answered is because it was on market share, okay? And you see market share in the specification, but perhaps, maybe, we don't necessarily know that we've got to calculate market share. And that is where you need to have a look at the appendices in the specification. My experience is very few teachers look at that. Very few teachers look at the entire specification. They just go to what students need to learn. Bang. And they'll see market share and they'll think, okay, market share, that's going to be the percentage of total sales made by a firm as a percentage of the total sales made in the entire industry or market, something like that. They're going to give a definition. If you go to the appendices give free rein to the examiner to ask about things such as percentage changes and percentages of something. And that's on page 57 in Appendix 7. Some generic quantitative skills that are being highlighted. And when quantitative skills are being used, that will be highlighted in the mark scheme. And it's also worth knowing that across the qualification, 10% of the marks have got to come from quantitative skills. Okay, that's worth knowing. So you know there's going to be some questions there, certainly, that ask you to do something mathematical. Now, something mathematical doesn't necessarily have to be a calculate question. It could be constructing a demand and supply diagram, or it could be interpreting some kind of tricky graph, such as an index number graph or something like that. Now, to give the exam team a degree of flexibility and to make the questions less predictable, the construct question, the calculate question, and the explain question are interchangeable. So, paper 1, question 1B, could be explain, could be calculate, could be construct. Question 2B, could be explain, could be calculate, could be construct. There's interchangeability because the assessment objectives for the explain, construct, and calculate question are identical. 1 knowledge, 2 application, 1 analysis. Now, look how badly this scored. 2.46 out of 4, with 26% of candidates scoring 0. Ouch. And that should really be a straightforward question. Okay, I'm looking at that and thinking, well, that's around about 1.5 raw marks lost. 1.5 raw marks lost. What's that? 3 UMS? What's 3 UMS? Around about 1/3 of a grade boundary. Ouch. Yeah, on a calculate question. Okay, not great. So here we go. That's an answer. Now, calculate questions are marked slightly differently to the construct and the explain questions. What the examiner will do is they will look at the final answer. And if the final answer is correct, they will give all of the marks. So if you had no workings and if you had no formula, but you had the correct answer, you're going to get all of the marks. It's only when the answer is incorrect do you then go back into what preceded the answer and say, is there any value in the workings? Have they given a formula? So what I always say to my students is, don't go all gung-ho and start just putting numbers into a calculator and then just giving your answer. That's risky. You make a mistake, you're going to get 0 if you do that. If you don't make a mistake, you'll get 4. But it's high risk. 4 to 0, wow, that's probably a grade boundary. 4 lost UMS over a simple fat finger on a calculator incident. Now, this particular answer here is semi-right. It's semi-right because the correct answer is 4.69%. We've not got to 2 decimal places, which is what the question requires you to do. They've rounded up to 1 decimal place. That was an expensive error that could be solved through practicing through. It's almost always 2 decimal places, okay, when it comes to a calculate question, which runs to decimal places. Now, you might turn around, some of you might turn around and say, well, look, it's not to 2 decimal places and there's no percentage sign. I'm going to take off 2 marks. Now, that seems incredibly mean to take off 2 for not rounding and not putting the percentage figure. So it's kind of like and or. If you don't put the percentage figure, you lose a mark. If you don't round, you lose a mark. But if you don't round and you don't put the percentage figure, you don't lose 2 marks. It's still 1 mark that is subtracted or not gained. So that's a 3-mark response. And just to contrast that, we've got this down here again. And again, that's just, it's frustrating. They've got the right answer, 4.69, but there's no percentage figure, you know, there's no percentage figure. And you're sort of thinking, what's that going to cost me? 2 to 3 UMS, you know, sort of between 1/5 and 1/3 of a grade boundary for not putting a percentage figure in. That's expensive. So again, it's a 3-mark answer. And 2.46 out of 4, that's an opportunity. I just want to be practicing these calculating questions. Okay, just looking over to the webinar chat, no questions coming in. So we'll move forward. Okay, next question, 1C. Now, 1C is an analyze question. So sharpen your pencils, people, and shuffle your papers, because we're going to have to move to the delegate booklet, because this analyze question, unless you have got microscopic vision, you're not going to be able to really see it on the PowerPoint slide. But I view the analyze question to be easier than the explain question. Why? Because it's almost always analyze to, and it's to knowledge, to application, to analysis. If it's to knowledge, to application, to analysis for analyzing to, then that naturally leads to me to think 2 paragraphs. The first thing I'm going to analyze, 1 knowledge, 1 application, 1 analysis. The second thing I'm going to analyze in paragraph 2, 1 knowledge, 1 application, 1 analysis. In many respects, it's easier than the explain question, because with the explain question, you've got 2 application strands that are required. So it's point-based. And again, it sort of frightens me when you sort of see novice mistakes where the answer is totally generic. I've not looked at the fact that this is about a coffee shop. I've just ignored that extract booklet because I think that extract booklet is a waste of my time, because I'm a kind of person who memorizes notes. I'm the kind of person who memorizes the textbook. But if you do that, you're missing out on a significant proportion of the marks because your answers will be generic. That extract is there for a reason. And the reason is to demonstrate the skill that you can create an answer that is around a specific business, as opposed to it being any business. Okay, in the webinar chat, Zakia has just said hi. What does double count mean? Okay, I'm going to explain that in a second, Lynn. Good question. Okay, and we'll see that when we have a look at the actual answer. Again, it's a badly scoring question, this. 3.43 out of 6. Whew. I'm starting to sweat and shiver. 3.43 out of 6, with 25% of candidates getting 0. OMG. You know, this should be a really, really straightforward question. Now, we're going to have to go to the delegate booklet on page 3. Okay, and we'll see why, because that's what the question looks like. Okay, straight away, I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, right, well, you tell me in the webinar chat, what am I thinking as a teacher? What would be my critique without even reading it? What would be my critique to my students if I saw that on the right-hand side of that PowerPoint screen? See what people type in. Too long, says Paul Wynn. Agreed. Alison Pollock, no definition needed. That's what I mean by double counting. Azra says too much written material, a lot of words. That's exactly what I would be thinking there. Yeah? I would be streamlining that. And how do I get students to streamline? Through practice in the classroom, through practice in homeworks. Need to remove this idea that length equates to high marks. Okay? You need to be a bit more savvy, a little bit more sort of worldly wise, have better examination craft is what I say to the students. Now, let me deal with Lynn's double counting. So I've just swapped to one of my different monitors here. Now, look at what we've got here. The knowledge, of which there are 2 marks, can come from 2 places. It can come from a definition. I would never, ever define in an analyzed question. The only time I would define in an analyzed question is if I had no clue what the question was asking. But that makes no logical sense, because I must know what the question's asking because I've been able to offer up the definition. Surely the better way of getting the knowledge marks is by giving the 2 methods of secondary research. So there's no point in giving a definition of secondary research and then starting a paragraph with using the internet, because you're not going to get, the knowledge mark, the AO1 mark for using the internet, because the AO1 mark has already come from the definition. And the definition could be a lot longer in terms of words than just saying using the internet. So if you know the 2 methods, no point for the definition. So I'm going to savage this and say that is a waste of time. No point doing that at all. Now I'm going to pick my colors now, and my colors are always the same. This is how I mark my work with my students. I have a standard color format in marking. I get through a lot of orange pens for knowledge. I get through a lot of purple pens for application. I get through a lot of red pens for analysis. And I get through quite a few blue pens for evaluation. And the idea is, what I'm trying to do is build up an understanding of how questions are marked. It becomes more opaque with the levels-based questions, but on the points-based stuff, it becomes really, really clear. So there we are. Need to get into my orange. Using the internet. Again, I'm going to streamline. Why do I need this? One method of secondary research they could have used is simply just put using the internet. That's what you're getting the mark for. That's where the AO1 mark's coming for. Straight away, I've lost 5 lines. That's 5 lines of needless writing. That 5 lines and that time could be better spent somewhere else. Now, the question's got the coffee house in it. So that limits me in terms of my application. So I've got Coffee House is an innovative brand that regularly updates their menus. Yeah, I'll go with that. Regard to changing consumer tastes and trends. through the internet, they will see what sort of coffee people like, as Starbucks has many coffee, I'm not sure what that says, from types, I'm guessing, from Frappuccino to all sorts of unique blends. I guess unique blends, I'll take it, because everyone knows that coffee is a mixture of Robusta and Arabica beans. So I've got my AO2 for sure there. A little bit long-winded, okay. Could it be shorter there? Don't need all of that. Coffee house can learn from this and incorporate coffee blends to help grow their business, as this will retain more customers. So I've got some, well, it should be red actually. I've got some analysis there as well. Okay, so I'm going to continue with my annotations, and I am articulating this, so if you follow the actual question, you'll be able to see where we're going from with this. Another method would be using articles, okay? Articles, is that different from the internet? Well, it could be newspaper articles, it could be magazine articles. So we'll give the student the benefit of the doubt there. So that's going to get the AO1 mark. And the fact that they're saying published regularly, I think published more is akin to magazines and newspapers rather than necessarily the internet. So that reinforces the idea that I'm thinking that the student is suggesting magazines, suggesting newspapers. Okay, then we've got this stuff here about the coffee house. Now this is a little bit opaque, could incorporate these unique designs on there to try and sort of improve their coffee shop and create a welcoming atmosphere that will give their shops a unique selling point. Again, that was given with benefit of the doubt, the fact that it's coffee is in the question. Welcoming atmosphere could be about quite a few different businesses, but I guess there's perhaps just about enough there to maybe suggest that this is about a coffee shop. And then at the end, you've got the idea that it's going to increase their market share, revenue, and help them grow. So that is your AO3, okay? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this at the end, okay? And by saving it, I'll be able to save the annotations, okay? And then we'll put them into the resource pod, okay? Now, somebody asked, are you looking at papers 3 and 4 today? No, we're not. We're going to look at papers 1 and 2, because in an hour session, there is absolutely no way you can look at every single paper. But in papers 3 and 4, it was the same problem as papers 1 and 2. It tended to be the assess questions that let people down. And speaking of the assess questions, that is what we are going to move on to in a second. Okay, so I'm going to come out of this screen share and screen share back to a different screen. I'm going to come back to screen 1. Okay. And we're now going to have a look at 2A. Okay, 2A. It was a badly answered defined question. Should easily be just 2 marks of knowledge, really, shouldn't it? For me, I just give my students a definition list. Some years I've said to the students, you can populate the definition list yourself, okay? And that could be part of a homework. And then we look at the definitions and we decide if the definitions are good enough. But what I've recently been doing is just going through definitions and creating my own list. Although definition lists are coming provided by Edexcel. They may be here. I know they are here for the UK domestic A-level. They may be there in the international A-level. If not, they're certainly being produced. Okay, and I'll show you where, if they are there, where to find them a little bit later on when we get to the support. So these knowledge questions, they should be easy, but 58% of candidates scored 0 on question 2A in paper 1. An average on a definition question being below 1. And I tell you why, because that definition question was a question on test marketing, and a significant number of people mixed up test marketing with product trials. And that is what we have in our first example. We have got a student who's mixed up product trials with test marketing. And when you do that, I'm afraid to say the answer is always going to be 0. And to contrast against that, we've now got a student that does understand what test marketing is. We've got selling products in a limited area, and then we've got some development of it so they can improve the product so it's more successful in the larger or global market. That's where our second AO1 comes from. So there we get our 2, okay? That's where we get our 2 marks from. 2 pieces of knowledge. Now, the rule with a definition question is if the definition is accurate, 2 marks. If there is semi-understanding, 1 mark. No understanding, like we had with our first exemplar, 0 marks. Okay, so that's 2A. Now, we're going to go back and have a look at 2E. And the lack of annotations shouldn't necessarily be a problem here because it's not points-based marked. I'm not going to be underlining things and saying, right, there is an example of AO1. There is an example of AO2. There is an example of AO3. The way points-based marking works is examiner judgment. Now, it's very, very easy to get to level 1. Some understanding will get you to level 1. It's very, very difficult to get to level 4. The vast majority of answers are in level 2 and level 3. Now, I've read on the internet things like this. My students have done everything in the mark scheme and they've only got level 3 and I can't understand it. Well, I read that to be they've done everything in the mark scheme, as in mention the things that are in the indicative content. But the indicative content is just to give you an idea of what students might generate. The way it's marked is according to these level descriptors. And you might mention something in the indicative content in a student's answer. But if it doesn't have lots of explanation, if it doesn't have lots of application, and if it's not evaluated thoroughly, I'm not surprised it doesn't get to level 4. It's not about mentioning what's in the indicative content. It's about meeting and matching what is in that particular mark scheme. So notice I've not even put the indicative content up. I've just put the level descriptors. And the level descriptors reflect the assessment objectives. AO1, knowledge, orange. AO2, application, purple. AO3, analysis, red. AO4, evaluation, blue. And when we get to level 4, the predominant skill is evaluation. So what I'm trying to do there is distill down those level descriptors to reflect each of the 4 assessment objectives. Notice in level 1, we're not even expecting any evaluation. So a level 1 answer could be really, really poor. Maybe just a definition with very little else. Okay, we're going to have a look at an example now. And it's a question that's come up before. It's a question on market mapping. And it was really badly answered, 3.74 out of 10. And the question has turned up before in a slightly different guise. 47%, not far away from half, are only getting into level 1 and level 2. So this was a real bogey question. This was an expensive question. Okay, probably cost candidates, assuming we could get to about sort of 6, probably cost candidates half a grade boundary right here. And it's because of simplistic analysis, not developing things with linked strands, just making a statement and then moving on to something else. No application, no use of the extract, or single strand evaluation, just saying it's expensive, it's time consuming, it might not be accurate. Really, really low quality evaluation with no development, no depth. Okay, now you can find this example on the delegate booklet in page 5, and then the mark scheme is on page 6 and 7. Now, we don't have to worry about annotations here, because what we're doing is we're making a judgment. Okay, we're making a judgment. So the only annotation that I would ever put on these answers is just things to sort of make me, just remind me there. So please do have a look at that. Okay, I'm going to give you 3 minutes to have a, no, 2 minutes to have a read of that. So that'll take us to 9:45 GMT. Page 5 on the delegate booklet. You could probably read it off the screen. This one's not so bad. We have not got a very sophisticated answer at all. We've got some understanding of market mapping. Doesn't have to be low quality, and it doesn't have to be low price. It could be anything on those axes, but okay, there's some understanding of what market mapping is. I've no idea what the second paragraph is talking about at all. I'm then looking at the third paragraph. Use market mapping to compare other markets to see what the market is missing. Maybe something there about finding a gap in the market. However, this may not be accurate, so she can't depend on market mapping. Very, very simplistic application. What do we think? What do we think? Pretty much everyone's going for sort of, yeah, I can't, Sophie's name, Diana, wouldn't be counted as application because it's in the question. So, yeah, chains of reasoning aren't strong. I'm not sure there's very many chains of reasoning. I think I can find one. Level 1, level 2. I mean, it got 3, but I could also see 2. And when I say 3, I mean marks, not level. So level 1, level 2 border, 3 or 2, 2 or 3. And on a 10-mark question, there is a 2-mark adjacency to reflect the fact that examiners could potentially have different viewpoints. I don't think you need that 2-mark adjacency on this particular question. I think if you gave it level 1, 2 or level 2, 3, I think you could make a case for either when you look at those level descriptors, okay? But it is a very poor answer and indicative of the fact that the average score was 3.74. A very poor score. Right, let's move on and have a look at a different assess question. And it's the assess questions all the way. And if we were to expand into papers 3 and 4, not that time allows us to do that, it would be the same message. It's the 12-mark assess questions on papers 3 and 4, which were the laggards. They were the ones that cost people the majority of the marks. And surprisingly, question 1B on paper 3, which was a construct question involving the increase in the cost of materials. That was another badly answered question, but due to our time constraints, we can't look at that. Okay, let's have a look at another question now. We're into paper 2, and we're looking at 1B. It's another calculate question, okay? And I just wanted to point it out that it's a really straightforward calculate question, calculating a percentage change. And I've got no idea why that was only 2.36 out of 4. The only thing I can turn around and say is that percentage changes are not explicitly mentioned in the specification, but they are in the appendix. So you're not going to find percentage changes in the main body of what students need to learn. And that's the only way I can explain this. I can't really explain why a percentage change question has got such a low average score, with 39% of people scoring 0. To me, it's really obvious. New minus old divided by old times 100. And I'm not going to spend any more time on that other than flag it up, because what I do want to spend time on is another assess question. Okay, now this is a different animal, but you can see again, 3.94 out of 10. You know, this is a level 2 average. Okay, 36% of the candidates scored level 1 and level 2. A really poorly answered question. Now, it's the same message as what we had with the market mapping assess question. Making sound bites, making points, not developing the points thoroughly enough, not adding the application into the points. And the evaluation is a sentence or 2 sentences. The evaluation has not been developed. By not developing the evaluation, you limit yourself. Now, this is a much longer question, and it can be found in the delegate booklet on pages 8 and 9, and the mark scheme follows that on pages 10 and 11. So again, it's 9:51. I'm going to give us 5 minutes to have a look at this penultimate question. As you can see, it's a really rather lengthy question. Anna Wakar saying, any major difference in the 10 and 12 marker questions? No, not really. I mean, the only real difference in the 10 and 12 marker questions is that the mark scheme provides you with the ability to be a little bit more precise when it comes to awarding marks in level 3 and level 4. Level 3 and level 4 have got a slightly larger mark range, but all of the level descriptors are the same. So what we're saying in papers 1 and 2 is being repeated in papers 3 and 4. The thing that surprised me was how well the 20 markers were done. So let's have a read of this and let's see what people's thoughts are. So you might want to put that in the webinar chat, what you think on this. 10 mark question, level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. You read the question, then you say, I'm going to read the mark scheme. Level 1. Does level 1 match what I've read? No, it's better than that. I read level 2. Does that match what I've read? No, it's better than that. Level 3, I match what I've read. Maybe, maybe not. If you think level 3 is the most appropriate level, and I'm not saying it is, I'm just giving an example, you go to the midpoint of the level. What happens if there is no midpoint and the midpoint ends up with a 0.5? You round up. You take the higher of the 2 marks that surround the midpoint. Okay. So Laura has made a point that the 20 mark question actually wasn't that well answered. I am going to turn around and say, well, look, for paper 1, the average was 9.05 out of 20. But, yeah, that is not as bad as what we're seeing on these questions. Okay? What we're seeing on these questions are a significantly worse performance, percentage terms, compared to that. Plus, on question 3 in paper 1, we have got 21% in level 1 and level 2. So again, not as bad as what we're looking at here. And in the context of a 1-hour training session, obviously we want to focus on the ones that aren't so good. So I would draw your attention to the ones that we've selected from paper 1, Constantina. You will see there that on the bars where people have done really, really badly, they are the ones which are the largest bars. Hence, that's why I have selected these. Plus, if we do look at 20-mark questions, 20-mark questions would take up virtually the entire training session because some of them are four pages long. I always say to my students on these assess questions, I always say to them, I want to see 5 paragraphs. Yeah. First paragraph is the first point. Developed with application. Lots of linked strands, please. Second paragraph, however. Evaluation of that first point. Lots of linked strands with application, please. Third paragraph, second point. Developed with application. Lots of linked strands, please. Fourth paragraph, evaluation of second point. With application, lots of linked strands, please. Final paragraph, conclusion. Bringing in some previously unseen evaluation. Don't want the conclusion to be a summary of what has gone before. Okay? That's what I say to my students, and it just requires practice. You know, I don't enjoy marking these for homework. You know, I sort of shudder if I've set people 5 assess questions because I'm thinking that is not going to be a quick marking exercise. But with a model answer, which is color-coded, you can slowly ratchet them towards a better performance. Okay. Time, not an issue. Not if you've streamlined on the 6-mark questions and the 4-mark questions. Okay. Don't think that I'm, whoa. Just because I teach my students to pick 5 paragraphs, there is nothing in the mark scheme that says you have to have 5 paragraphs. You can do it whatever way you want. All I am trying to do with my students is create a format where an examiner can clearly see the thoroughness of the evaluation. I want them to see both points clearly evaluated, and then I want to see some additional evaluation in a conclusion. There is nothing in the mark scheme that says you must have 5 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs, 2 paragraphs, nothing at all. You're assessing the skills. All I'm trying to make sure that my students do is make the skills obvious to the person reading and marking their response. Okay? Could a strand equate to a sentence of analysis? And how many strands? There is no actual precise number. And I think there is a selectivity in there, Nitaka. You could pick a point, yeah, that is so simplistic, it's difficult to build linked strands from. Or you could pick a point which is more sophisticated, which you can build significant linked strands from. I will always say to my students, think about the end game. Before you select a point, think about how you're going to evaluate it, and think about how many linked strands you can build from it. And that then tells you whether or not you should select that as the point you want to use. If you're coming to the conclusion that the evaluation is going to be too simplistic and the linked strands will be limited because it is so obvious, ditch that as a point, think of a different point. So it may well be here, but on something like this, you know, the vast majority of students are going to talk about interest rates. Okay, how can I make interest rates a bit longer? We can talk about interest rates being a fixed cost. So interest on the overdraft is a fixed cost. If interest rates as an overdraft is a fixed cost, therefore I'm going to have to make more units worth of contribution to pay off the fixed cost burden. As a result of that, the break-even point is going to rise. As a result, the margin of safety will start to fall. And I'm thinking that through. I mean, that's totally generic. Obviously, I would need to put something in there that uses the extract. But I'm just shooting from the lip here with no pre-preparation. I'm sort of counting the number of linked strands and thinking, yeah, that's okay. Whereas a lot of students will say costs go up, profit goes down. And that's the extent of their linked strands. Another place I'd be thinking of going is perhaps looking at the cash flow implications of having an overdraft. Okay, I'm thinking that could be quite sophisticated because a lot of students will avoid cash flow. And if they do mention cash flow, they're going to get it mixed up with profit. So there's going to have to be a significant cash outflow when the overdraft is repaid. That could seriously damage the liquidity. And then I could start bringing in perhaps some liquidity ratios. Now, I know that is WBS 1.2, but when this is sat, WBS 1.2 will have been revised at the same time of WBS 1.1. So I'm sort of thinking about, and it requires practice. That's all it does, it requires practice to come up with these things, okay? Now, the question you've got in the delegate pack was given level 4. It was given 8. So right on the level 3, level 4 border, okay? So if you'd have given it 9 or 10, that's adjacent. If you'd have given it 7 or 6, that's adjacent. I would suggest 7 or 8 seems very, very fair. So that is an example of a very, very decent question. What I also like about it is it's tried to separate things out. Its readability is much more straightforward than perhaps some of the other answers. The examiner doesn't have to do a lot of work. The examiner doesn't have to keep rereading it. They get the idea almost straight away. Should they be looking at 2 benefits or drawbacks, or can they access full marks with 1 benefit? I would personally always pick 2, okay? Personally always pick 2. Why? Look at the question. Assess the benefits, plural. I would not want to assess 1 benefit, because if I assess 1 benefit, I'm not sure how that is going to ride with the examination team. Assess the benefits. So for me, mitigating the risk of my students doing badly, when I see assess the benefits, I suggest that we look at 2 benefits and assess those. So that is level 4, and that was an 8-mark question. Okay, so final question now, guys and girls. 2E. Last one. Again, another badly answered question. And when I say badly answered, I mean really badly answered. Okay, there were other questions that weren't answered so well, but these are the ones which were really answered not so well. Okay. Now, this was a question which for me was screaming price elasticity of demand. You can find it on page 12 and 13 of the delegate booklet, and the mark scheme is following that on pages 14 and 15. But again, it's another one of those that to put on a PowerPoint screen, it's almost impossible. Now, the main issue with this particular question was that students just thought it was about raising prices. They didn't pick up on the idea that it was about raising membership prices off-peak. And I would be thinking to myself, off-peak, price elastic demand, raising prices when demand is price elastic will lead to lower revenue. That's what I would be thinking. Again, Constantina, I can't give you a definitive answer to that. It depends on what happens at the standardization meeting. But when I see the phrase benefits in a question, that says to me plural. That says to me more than 1. Now, there might be some scenario, what happens if you get one that is done really, really well? But I was not at the standardization meeting. Because if I was at the standardization meeting, I wouldn't be able to do this training because there's a conflict of interest. Risk minimization for me is to always look at two. Benefits. That way, nobody can turn around and say you're not answering the question. Question's asking for benefits. Now, this one's not. It's asking for the likely impact. So therefore, if you look at one impact, clearly you're answering the question. It's not asking for assess the likely impacts. It's looking for assess the likely impact. So have a look at this one and see what you think about this. So Jose is going level 4. Notice in the mark scheme, okay, on page 14, there is a diagram. Not sure what the supply curve is adding to that diagram on page 14 of the mark scheme. But you don't have to draw a diagram because there is nothing in the question that says you need to draw a diagram. If it says you must illustrate your answer with a diagram, then obviously it becomes a critical part of the question, but you've not got that. Certainly, if I was drawing a diagram, I'd be wanting to draw a very price elastic demand curve and showing a movement along that price elastic demand curve, a contraction along the demand curve, if I wanted to draw a diagram. I'm looking at the answer and thinking to myself, if I was answering that, I would want to separate the evaluation and make it really clear. I mean, I can see it there. I can see however, and I can see however, but I'd want to separate it out to make it really clear. I want to smack the examiner around the face with the obvious evaluative properties of my answer. I want them to see it right there. I don't want them to have to search for it. Yeah. I think we're getting the idea that it is a really good answer, okay? And sometimes it's worth just having a look at those really good answers to compare it against answers which are not so good. I mean, if you were to compare that to the market mapping exemplar that we looked at, it's a different world. But it's only a 6-mark difference. That scored 9, okay? Level 4, 9. If you gave it 10, that would be adjacent. If you gave it 8, that would be adjacent. But I think you would agree that that one is clearly better than the previous one that we looked at on overdraft, albeit a different question. I don't think anybody would be giving that 7. Okay. So that's having a look at the poorly performing questions in the exam. And it's already 10:08. So you can see there was never going to be any scope to have a look at any more than that. So we'll look to the support now. Okay. There's a specification page if you're not familiar with that. I've put the hyperlink in there. So when you download the PowerPoint, that hyperlink will take you to the business homepage. And the most important bit for me is the exam materials. Now, have a look on the left-hand side, teaching and learning materials. It may well be that some definition sheets are in there already, which you could learn, and they would be in the teaching and learning materials element. I know that they have been done for the UK domestic. I'm not sure about the situation for the IAL, but I create my own definitions. So that's why I've not looked for it. And again, you've got a hyperlink there to the course material page. Pearson portal, again, you've got a hyperlink there, and you've got your exam wizard and you've got your results plus. Now, I'm not going to spend a long time on exam wizard because I have managed to find the link to the official Pearson exam wizard YouTube video that shows you how to operate exam wizard. So all of those questions about, I don't know how to operate Exam Wizard, I don't know how to create my own homework assignments, I don't know how to create my own test papers, that is a really, really good Pearson created YouTube video. So again, please do use that hyperlink. And the same can be said for Results Plus. Results Plus, great service. And that's what I was looking at when I created this training. The third one down, global results analysis. I just went through paper 1 and 2 and picked the questions that were done the worst. The questions which had, as a percentage of the maximum, the lowest percentage with the lowest average. And again, if you need some tuition on how to use Results Plus, there is a fantastic Pearson created Results Plus YouTube video. I've put the hyperlink in there, which of course you can use. And that's pretty much it. So are there any final questions? Well, one's coming from Diana. Should the conclusion say overall and give a judgment statement? I would say the conclusion, for me, this is for me, there is nothing in the mark scheme that says you must use this phraseology. For me, when I've been in standardization meetings for UK domestic A-level and UK domestic GCSE, people talk about conclusions. And if they talk about conclusions, I would want to start my conclusion with, in conclusion. It's only a small thing, and it's not mentioned on the mark scheme. You can use overall if you want. But for me, it's just a stylistic thing. If they're looking for a conclusion, tell them it's a conclusion. And I would be looking in the conclusion at some previously hitherto unseen evaluation. I might consider the magnitude of the effect, and I might consider how the magnitude of the effect could change and become more significant, bearing in mind various factors might occur. So the magnitude of the overdraft as an effect on the business is dependent on the size of the overdraft. It's dependent on what is happening to the interest rates on the overdraft. It's depending on the relationship the business has with the bank as to determine whether or not the bank is going to call the overdraft back in. And I'm holding these evaluative points back. I don't want to repeat what I've said elsewhere in the answer, but I'm holding them back to use in that conclusion to bring in extra evaluation. Evaluation on top of evaluation. Multi-faceted evaluation. Because the last thing the examiner reads before they go to the mark scheme is that final paragraph. And as we saw earlier on, the amount of blue on the level 4 level descriptor, evaluation is the predominant skill to justify level 4. Okay, so I hope I've answered that question, Diana. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Colin's created a group of Facebook teachers. I'm a member of that. So hopefully you've downloaded all of the annotations there for that analyzed question. How much is the English language level important? Well, it's important to the level that I think you're going to find it difficult to generate sophisticated evaluation if you've got a poor understanding of English, because it's going to come in the subtlety of the way you articulate yourself in English. So I think that's always going to be a challenge, Shivash. I think it's going to be really difficult to get that top level evaluation if your English is not so good, just because of these difficulty in articulation. What you're more likely to get there is students giving points, negative points to counteract the positive points, but aren't able to get into that idea of the magnitude and the significance, because this is phraseology which is alien to them. Diana says, can you use MOPS? You can use whatever you want. There is nothing in the mark scheme that says you have to use MOPS. There are lots of different organizations out there that suggest different things about what you put into an evaluation. Okay? If it's not on the mark scheme, it doesn't have to be there. It's those level descriptors that are used. Now, there might be a lot of different strategies to allow you to meet those level descriptors. You can use MOPS. You can use other things. Okay? It's what you feel most comfortable with. But the critical thing is looking what's in the level descriptors. Okay. Yeah, Rensis said, I've seen questions on demand and supply construction, which is taught in Unit 1, being asked in Unit 3. No problem with that. In fact, that's what I was referring to, Rensi. Question 1B in WBS13 this year was a construct question asking students to consider the increase in the cost of raw materials, and it was badly answered. Because Unit 3 is synoptic. If you have a look at the specification, within Unit 3, they can ask material from Unit 1. Likewise, in Unit 4, they can ask material that is in Unit 2. It's in the specification. So that's why you had that demand and supply diagram, question 1B in WBS13. It was there because of the level of synopsicity between 1 and 3, and likewise 2 and 4. Hopefully I've answered that question. I think it's John Rensi, rather. Apologies for calling you by your surname. Okay. What's this? Can you confirm? Please, can you confirm? Can you award AO3 marks of AO2? Yeah. Certainly in points-based questions. Of course you can. They're demonstrated analysis. So on that 6-mark analyze question, if there was no reference to cappuccino, frappuccino, anything like that to do with the coffee house, they would get 4 marks. If they said, well, they could use the internet to find out what is on trend. As a result, they will be able to attract more consumers. Therefore, their profits will go up. There is nothing in there which is applied at all. They would get the AO1 mark and the AO3 mark. Okay. I think we're now sort of wrapping it up. You can see here that I tried to pack in quite a bit. It's an hour's training and we're now sort of touching 10:20. Okay. You can do, John, this loser approach. Again, there's nothing in the mark scheme that says you can use this, you can use that. It's whether or not you have met what is in the level descriptors. My only problem is with all of these different techniques that all of these various external training providers have given is that people tend to use them as like a scaffolded thing. MOPS. I'm going to look at the market. Single strand statement. I am going to look at the objectives of the business. Single strand statement. And they think because they've done MOPS, suddenly everything is good and it's going to be level 4. And they're not demonstrating what is required in that top level. All they're doing is some kind of scaffolded, paint by numbers evaluation. It's the quality of the evaluation that's the critical thing, not rigidly following some kind of acronym. Mr. Leith has given us a link to the Facebook group. Okay, I think we're there. Thank you very much, everybody. Hopefully you found that useful. Sorry about going 20 minutes over. I'm going to have to press the next slide to go to the Pearson logo because I'm always told off for that. Haneen has asked a question. In 8-mark questions, there's no need to have a conclusion. Is this correct? Correct. 8-mark questions do not require a conclusion. 8-mark questions just require some evidence of balance. It's only 8 marks. Yeah, what is MOPS, says Paul Wynn. MOPS is market, objective, product, situation. That's what MOPS is. So it's one of these things that has been purported out there as a way of demonstrating perhaps really high quality evaluation, but it depends what you do with it. The market is very competitive, full stop. Okay, you've dealt with the M, but it's not really high quality evaluation. The objectives of the business are to grow market share. You've got to actually do something and expand on it. And that's what I find quite nervy about these different acronyms, where it's like some kind of scaffolded way of generating the evaluation. Okay. Samantha's joined the Facebook group. Thank you very much, Jose. Thank you. Hopefully you found it useful. Oh, there we go. Diana's put something in there. Okay. I thought the S was situation personally, but that's just me. Okay. Thank you very much, Humra. Okay, thank you, thank you, thank you. Haneen, does it say that students have to give another option in the level descriptors? I can't find that anywhere. So therefore they don't have to do it. It's marked on the level descriptors, okay? If you match what the level descriptors say, you should be allowed to get to the level. Okay, thank you, Shivash. Good stuff, good stuff, good stuff, good stuff. Yeah, insight's a great word. Okay.